A mix of scattered around with a plastic Christmas tree twinkling in one corner beside a jukebox where, oh yeah, perfect. Dolly Parton begged Jolie not to take her man. You just grab yourself a seat now, honey, the old waitress called out. We'll get right to you. He took a booth and plucked the laminated menu out of the holder on the condiment caddy. Want some coffee, handsome? He looked up at the grandmotherly type with the name tag that read Mervine. She had red lipstick and redder hair. Her accent took a turn from the McDonald's ladies. Mervine's sounded like she should sing Dolly. No, ma'am, thanks. Can I get a Coke? You sure can. Traveled a ways, haven't you? She picked up the pair of coffee mugs. From up north? Yes, ma'am, Chicago. That's a ways. You want more time with that menu? Ah, I guess. She put a hand with the mug handle around her thumb, on her hip, angled her head. I'm gonna tell you what you want. You are? I got a knack. Now, you tell me if I'm wrong, and you're a vegetarian or some other kind of tarian. But what you want is the chicken and gravy, mashed potatoes, and green beans. You're gonna get cornbread with that, and we make it right here. You trade that Coke for good sweet tea, and you'll have yourself a meal good looking. That sounds really good. Guaranteed. She winked at him before she walked off. Darcia, get that pretty young man some sweet tea. Herschel, y'all get me a hot yardbird swimming, a mound of Murphy, and aside the greens. He ate every bite and drank 2 glasses of sweet tea. Dolly plunked a fat wedge of apple pie with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting on top in front of him. Ma'am? Pie's on me. You need some meat on those bones. If there's a man in this world doesn't like pie with ice cream, I've yet to meet him. And I've yet and met most of them. You still haven't met him, he said, and made her laugh. You've got sad eyes, handsome. See if that pie don't put a smile in them. He left her a $20 tip and figured he wasn't the first to fall a little in love with her. He thought about walking off the pie, thought about the bear, and went straight back to his room. He did a few push-ups. He didn't know about meat on the bones, but he sure as hell wanted to start putting on some muscle. He took off his bedspread because who knew how many naked asses had sat on it before, then got a book out of his duffel. He turned the TV back on to fill the unfamiliar quiet. He sent the text and relaxed when Mags reported back she'd stopped for the night in Nebraska. After bunching the pair of lumpy pillows together, he cracked the book open. He woke, still dressed, light on, TV muttering, and the wail of a kid howling. He wanted cartoons. It took him a minute to remember where he was. Groggy, wondering what the hell a kid was doing outside his room in the middle of the night, he walked to the window. When he pulled back the side of the shade, the sun blasted his eyes. After slapping a hand over them, he left the shade fall back, blinked, looked at his watch. 9:30? He'd slept almost 12 hours. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept 8 hours, much less 12. Then again, he'd never driven more than an hour at a time before, or driven up mountains. He cleaned up, hauled out his stuff, bought a Coke and a bag of chips, breakfast of champions, from the machines, and was on his way east by 10. He expected he'd fall in love with the ocean when he got there, and there was a hell of a lot of North Carolina between the Tennessee border and the Atlantic. He calculated the fastest route would get him there in 8 or 10 hours, depending on how often and how long he stopped. But he decided almost immediately he didn't want or need fast. He expected to fall in love with the ocean, but he hadn't expected to fall in love with the mountains. If the Smokies seeded an infatuation, the Blue Ridge and Appalachians set the seeds to blossom. Instead of the highways, the interstate, he toured the byways. He enjoyed the rise and fall, the climb and descent, where around every turn the world opened to a new vista. He stopped a while at Lake Norman. It was no Lake Michigan, but pretty enough. He liked the trees and the December quiet while he ate a burrito he'd picked up at a mini-mart. He consulted his map, decided he'd take a swing through something called the Uwharrie National Forest, then take a detour up to Chapel Hill, check out the college campus. If it looked promising, he definitely wanted college at some point. Maybe he'd find a motel in that area, get a feel for it all. He'd head for the coast the next day or the day after. The forest provided a brand new wonder. Since he already regretted he hadn't taken the time to walk any of the Smokies, he parked at one of the well-marked trailheads. He took his phone, his keys, his half a bottle of Coke, and a Kit Kat bar. Then the born and bred city boy set off in his chucks to hike the trail. It smelled of pine and wild, and compared to December in Chicago, the shadowy high 50s felt like spring. He couldn't get over the quiet. He would have said he'd grown up in a quiet neighborhood, but it equaled madhouse compared to forest quiet. He heard a couple of birds, saw a squirrel scamper up a tree, and came to a stream where water gurgled over rocks. He wondered if he might end up in a place like this. Not year-round, he thought, as he followed the trail, but maybe like a vacation place, a hideout. He'd need another place, in or close to an urban center, somewhere. A guy had to earn a living, after all. Atlanta, maybe, or Miami, Houston, or Raleigh. He'd probably know it when he saw it. And someday, absolutely someday, he'd fly to Europe. Florence and Paris and London, Madrid and Prague and all of it, just all of it. A lot to learn and a lot to earn before that someday. But right now he just wanted a walk in the woods and a trip to the ocean. He walked more than an hour before he heard anything but that silence, those strange to him forest sounds, before he heard anything that said human. An engine, a couple of them. The little he'd read about the forest on his phone told him he heard off-roaders, something else he'd never done and would try someday. But right now, it felt like an intrusion into his hike, so he headed back. When the buck crossed his path, he stood struck with wonder. It stared back at him haughtily. No other word for it, Harry thought, as he slowly, carefully slipped his phone out of his pocket. The minute he took the picture, he was struck again by the many sharp points on the antlers. If Bambi, people forget Bambi, was a guy decided to charge, Harry figured he'd end up full of antler holes. I'm cool. We're cool, right? I'm just heading down this trail. The buck made some sound. It might have been derision, dismissal, or disgust. But the important thing was he strolled off the trail and into the trees. Good. That's good. We're all good. And Harry covered the rest of the way back to his car at a light jog. He'd want to explore, he reminded himself as he started the car. He'd wanted some adventure. Well, mission accomplished. He drove to the university and found yet another love. It was big and sprawling, and he'd need big for the furthering his education plans. It was beautiful with its classic, dignified buildings, its green quads, and he wanted beautiful if he could get it. As Will liked to say, Harry yearned to learn, and he could picture himself here satisfying that yearning. For a semester or two, he thought, as he got out to wander. Just another college kid in high-top chucks, worn jeans, and oversized jacket. Thousands went here, he thought, crossing the quads, sitting in auditoriums for lectures, hurrying down halls to classes. He could be one of them. Maybe in the spring. Or the fall, if he took the full gap year. But he wanted what they served here. Knowledge. As he had in the forest, he walked and he studied. He blended with a group walking between classes and slid right into a building and a library. He wandered the stacks, smelled the books, and no one paid any attention to him. By the time he'd taken his informal tour, covering only a fraction of the campus, he knew he'd spend some of his college life right there. To seal the deal, he walked to one of the shops and bought a UNC hoodie. Lots of shops, he noted, restaurants, clubs, college hangouts. And as he drove around the area, added some very nice homes to that list. Nice houses where people had nice things an enterprising young man could liquidate. He chose another motel, had a decent pizza with sausage and black olives. He settled in for research with his laptop. He made a list of courses he wanted to take. After 4 years in high school, his Spanish was pretty damn good, so he figured to switch to French to start. English Lit, of course. Art history, because when he expanded to stealing art, he needed to know what to target. More computer classes, more math. He'd wanted some gemology eventually. He could take a brush at engineering. No joining clubs, no frats, no serious girlfriends, no dorm life. He'd have to live off campus. Theater kids, he thought, always ended up really tight-knit. So no trying out for plays, though he missed that a lot. But maybe he could slide through a semester, just one, in tech or costume or makeup. Satisfied with his emerging plan, he did his nightly push-ups. Maybe he'd buy some dumbbells when he had a place. Get serious about building some muscle. In the morning, he donned his new hoodie, checked out, then hit one of the campus coffee shops. He ordered a latte and a bagel, mostly because it seemed like a college thing to do. He ate outside, watching college life stream by, admitting to his envy for it, and listening to their voices. The locals had a flowing sort of accent that he practiced in his head as he toured another section of the campus. Snatches of conversation ranged from Professor Hardass, the party at the dorm, to getting through till winter break. He slipped in and out of buildings and, though he felt bad about it, lifted some jock-looking guy's wallet. Since the Mark wore Air Jordans XS that ran close to $200, he didn't feel all that bad about it. He couldn't very well forge a student ID unless he had a template. He waited until a rest stop beyond Raleigh before he took out the wallet. Carson Edward Wyatt III. It wasn't really right, but the name and the smirky smile on the ID wiped out even a whisper of feeling bad. CE, because Harry just bet, that's what they called him, had a North Carolina's driver's license, so a native son. He had an American Express gold card, a platinum visa, 2 Trojans, and $180 in cash. Harry took scissors out of his backpack, cut up the driver's license, the credit cards. He pocketed the cash and the condoms, divided the pieces of the credit cards and license between the 2 trash cans. The wallet, a Fendi in black leather, could replace his own. He tucked the student ID away in the backpack along with the fresh cash. After switching out the contents of his old wallet, he tossed that into his backpack. He made it to Nag's Head with a palmico sound behind him and the Atlantic in front of him. He knew he had to find a room, but he walked over the dunes, across the sand, and just stood. The water rushed toward the sand, deep green capped in white, as the wind whipped at it. It whipped at him too, snapping at his sweatshirt, tossing through his hair. The green faded toward blue, then the blue deepened as the water spread out and out and out to the end of the world. It rolled up, slapped, curled back into itself, then did it all again. Again and again. Circling gulls cried out, and some small, skinny-legged birds danced along the wet sand. Other people walked to the beach. A youngish couple with a big, beautiful golden retriever on a red leash. An oldish couple who held hands like lovers. A dad with a grinning toddler riding his shoulders. A long-legged woman in running gear, feet slapping the wet sand as she put in her smiles. He saw the remnants of a bonfire with the charred wood like black bones, and a tiny translucent crab that scuttled into a hole in the sand. He sat on that chilly sand, watched the waves, smelled the air, let the wind blow over him. As the sun dipped in the west, the eastern sky deepened, and so did the sea. When the first stars came out, he stood up to walk to the water. He slid a hand into his pocket, closed it over the bottle that held the last of his mother. He hadn't thought it would be hard, letting his last part go. It had been the point, hadn't it, of coming to the sea. But the grief struck so sharp he could only stand there and mourn. Son? Trapped in misery, he hadn't heard anyone approach. And when he turned, he saw a cop. He tried for his best nothing to see here, but his voice trembled a little. Yes, sir? I got word you've been sitting out here a couple of hours or more. Yes, sir. I've never seen the ocean before. I was just sitting here talking and taking it in. Uh-huh. He had a grizzled look to him, tufts of gray hair, weathered, ruddy-faced, and no bullshit eyes. How old are you, boy? 18. I've got ID. He'd done the stupid, Harry admitted, as he took out his wallet. He stood out. Harrison Booth from Chicago, Illinois. The cop nodded over it, handed the wallet back. A long way from home, aren't you? Family here with you? No, I'm on my own, officer. Deputy Prince. Deputy Prince, I wasn't hurting anyone. I just wanted to sit on the beach. Uh-huh. Got any drugs on you? No, sir. Well, I'll sure like to see what you got in that pocket. Deputy? Dark out here now, even with the moon. Cold with it. Why don't you just show me what you got in that pocket, and we'll get out of the dark and the cold. He could refuse, Harry thought. Then somebody with eyes like Deputy Prince would find some reason to haul him in. He took out the bottle. Now, what's in that thing? It's the last of my mother's ashes. She died. She had cancer and she died. And she always wanted to see the ocean. Prince looked into Harry's eyes. Harry knew his had filled, but he'd be damned if he'd cry in front of a cop. You came all this way to give her that? She was my mother. It's a hard loss, a mother. Lost mine 2 years back and still feel it. I'm sorry for your loss, Harrison. Have you got a place to stay? Not yet. I'm going to find a motel, maybe stay a couple days. Drive south about a quarter mile. You'll see the gull's nest on your left. You tell them I sent you. It's a good, clean place. And it's off-season rates. I will. Thanks. Don't stay out here too long. It's just gonna get colder. The deputy walked back over the sand. When he stood alone on the beach, again, Harry faced the sea, opened the bottle. We made it, Mom. I miss you, but I'm okay. I'm going to be okay, he said. by and let the ashes go. He stayed there for 3 days, setting his alarm every morning so he could walk down to the beach and watch the sunrise. He took what he judged as better than decent pictures of the elegant majesty of light spreading in reds and golds and shimmering pinks over the plate of the sea. He ate amazing barbecue and discovered the joy of hush puppies. Then he packed up and drove south on 12 to Hatteras. He took pictures of the lighthouse because lighthouse. Checked out the beaches. Quieter by far than Nag's Head or Kitty Hawk. If he came back this way, maybe he'd rent one of the cottages or splurge on an oceanfront house for a week. But for now, he drove to the end of the island and the ferry to Ocracoke. Another first, diving his car onto the boat, getting out to stand at the rail while it chugged its way over the sound. He watched the wake spear behind them, the gulls afly overhead. Once they docked, he drove to the other end of the island and boarded the big ferry in the harbor, bound for Cedar Island. From Hatteras, he could have driven to the mainland via roads and bridges, but the ferry rides meant he could just sit back or stand up and see, and feel and smell. For the first time in years, he didn't have a solid plan or need one. He had nowhere he had to be, nothing essential that had to be done. That had to change, he knew it, even looked forward to it. But for now, it was moment to moment, and he liked it. On the mainland, he drove the coast as much as he could, winding and wondering, stopping when the mood or hunger struck. Another motel, another diner. He learned in his handful of days in North Carolina that hush puppies equaled awesome. You could keep your grits, cheesy or otherwise, and he'd pit their barbecue against the world's. He crossed into South Carolina on a bright December afternoon, warm enough to have the windows open. Capitol, Columbia, Cotton, Fort Sumter, Clemson. Beaches, lots and lots of beaches. He spent a day exploring them, ate fried chicken. They knew what to do with a chicken. He practiced his regional accents and fabricated a story for the waitress when she asked where he was heading. Home for the holidays, ma'am, from college down at University of Florida. You've come a ways already. Where's home, honey? Kill Devil Hills, the Wright brothers. How about that? Well, you drive safe now and have a nice Christmas with your family. Can't hardly wait to see him. By the time he hit Georgia, peaches, Atlanta, peanuts, Jimmy Carter, he decided to spend a few days in one spot, and Savannah struck just the right note. He loved the gnarled trees, the cobbled streets, the waterfront, the graceful architecture, and the strangely easygoing vibrancy. He booked a room at the Thunderbird Inn because he liked the name, the look, and the easy walking distance to the historic district. He petted a carriage horse. The firsts kept coming, and picked a couple of fat pockets and strolls under silvery Spanish moss. He spent Christmas Eve eating pulled pork and nachos in his room, while he researched a very promising house, mansion, an easy walk away. It paid to keep eyes and ears open for an opportunity. The Carlyle family was hosting a big bust-out party tonight, followed by a Christmas brunch for close friends. Then they'd fly out, their own jet, for their annual ski trip in Vermont, where they had a second home. It seemed to Harry they'd not only be well insured, but could afford to lose a little something to offset his travel expenses. He read article after article on Jeb Carlyle, fourth generation Savanian, wealthy businessman. It appeared some of those ships that went in and out of the port were at least partially his. His wife, Jaylene, came from money too. They had the mansion in Savannah, the lodge in Vermont, a beach house in the Caymans. And there, Harry bet, there was some offshore tax dodging hanky-panky going on. They had 3 children, son JB, age 29, engaged to an heiress, naturally, son Joshua, age 26, working in the family business, and a daughter Juliet, age 20, attending the University of Georgia in Athens. Big patrons of the arts, Harry read as he munched on nachos. Extensive art collection. The house on the historic register opened partially to tours one day every spring. Because of that, he found plenty of photographs. Plenty more of the Carlyles attending galas, and Jaylene's really nice taste in jewelry. He decided to take a Christmas Eve walk, check out the house. If he could get close enough, maybe assess the alarm and security system. He changed into a decent shirt and his newest jeans. Strolling, he enjoyed the Christmas lights, the sounds of music and voices. More than one party tonight, he thought, and found his mind starting to slide back to Christmas Eves of the past. The tree in the front window, always the same spot, with the dopey felt Santa he'd made his mother in grade school, prominently hung. Stockings on coat books, Christmas music playing. Jingle Bell Rock meant dancing. Springsteen's Santa Claus is Coming to Town meant singing the refrain at the top of your lungs. He didn't want to think about all of that now. Didn't want to dwell on spending his first Christmas alone. Prepping for some night work was a better use of his time. He heard the party from a half-block away and saw the lights before that. The graceful 3-story brick shined in all white lights, and the trees dripping with moss twinkled with them. Music poured, and it sounded like a live band to him. People spilled out of the house onto the veranda, the balconies, even the sidewalk with their champagne flutes and highball glasses. And man, they dripped too. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds. Talk about the best Christmas ever. He could make enough in a 5-minute pass to put himself through Harvard. He stopped, as he suspected many others had and would, and studied the tableau. The windows gleamed with light, and the people moving behind them. Cocktail dresses, slick suits. He counted 3 trees, one on each floor, decorated and sparkling. Poinsettias, white ones, marched up the walk and steps with little lights inside the pots. Greenery tied with huge red bows and more tiny lights twinned up the columns of the veranda. What do you think? He recognized Juliet Carla from his research, though he thought she looked better in person. She'd cut her hair, one of those pixie deals, and it suited her, that pale gold crown, the long neck, the big blue eyes. It's beautiful. Not too much? Nothing's too much at Christmas. She smiled, took a sip from her champagne flute. Do I know you? I don't think so. Do you want to? It made her laugh. Maybe. Well, come on in. Oh, I was just walking by. I'm not invited. I live here, so now you are invited. She held out a hand. Juliet. Silas, he decided on the spot. Silas Harrison. Come on in, Silas Harrison. Let's get you some holiday cheer. What are you doing out walking alone on Christmas Eve? Just taking in the city. My first time here. Is that right? She walked him right into the house that smelled of pine and perfume and candle wax. The entrance foyer soared up. More poinsettias glimmered with lights on their marge of the curving staircase. A big round table held the biggest arrangement of red and white roses he'd ever seen or imagined. People milled everywhere. To the right, a wide doorway opened to more, and a simmering fire with a mantel alive with greenery and candles, the towering tree sparkling in the big window. Servers in white shirts, black pants, and red bow ties carried trays of drinks and finger food. Juliet snagged 2 flutes from one, set her mostly empty glass down. Merry Christmas. She tapped her glass to his. Merry Christmas. Hungry? Actually, I just ate, but thanks. Is everyone friendly around here? Hospitality is a religion in the savannah. Where are you from? Since he'd used his South Carolina accent, he went with it. Florence. Straight shot up 95, he remembered. I'm heading down to Jacksonville to surprise my grandparents. I figured to get there tonight, but hit more traffic than I planned for, so I'm here until morning, as I didn't want to get there so late I'd scare them instead of surprising them. Aren't you the sweetie? She gave him what could only be interpreted as the flirty. Traveling alone? With my brother. He's moping back in the room, talking to his girlfriend because I dragged him along with me. The story flowed right out of him. We lost our daddy last summer, and our mama back when Will was a boy, so it's just the 2 of us. I'm so sorry. She laid a hand on his. It's good of you to go see your family, and I don't expect he'll mope for long. Let's get you in the spirit. There's dancing upstairs. She led him to the staircase. So what do you do back in Florence? Right now, I'm doing carpentry work. My father's company. I'm taking a gap year with all that happened. But Willie, will be off to college in the fall, God willing, and I can go back to Carolina, UNC. How about you? Home for winter break, University of Georgia, family tradition. She took his hand, led him up the next set of stairs. This house is amazing. We take pride in it. His original plan had fallen along the lines of getting in, straight to the master bedroom and the safe he'd concluded he'd find. He'd assessed the locks and the alarm pad as Juliet led him through, knew he could beat them. But now it seemed simpler and somehow more polite to just palm a piece of jewelry off a handy wrist or neck and to be done with it. Not hers, he thought, because that would be downright rude, though she wore a trio of very nice diamond bangles on her right wrist and a chapard on her left. She hailed a man in a dark suit and red tie he recognized as Jeb Carlyle. "Daddy, I found the stray wandering the streets and brought him for some cheer." Carlyle laid a hand on his daughter's shoulder and gave Harry a steady once-over. "Is that so? Where did you stray from?" "Florence, sir. On my way to Jacksonville and my grandparents. We're just stopping here for the night in Savannah, and—" "I'm intruding?" "I invited you," Juliet reminded him. "What do you do back in Florence?" "Carpentry. I don't have the same skill my father did, but I know enough to say the mill work here is extraordinary." "His daddy passed last summer, so he's tending to his younger brother until he starts college. Then Silas here can go back to UNC. "You're in Carolina?" "Yes, sir. I'm going back in the fall, once Willie is settled." "And what are you studying here?" "Daddy, how much longer are you going to grill poor Silas just for coming in for a drink and dance?" "This might be my last." "I'm a lit major. Like most lit majors, I'm planning to teach to keep the wolf from the door while I write myself the great American novel." That got a faint smile and a little nod. "Southern thrillers?" Harry laughed. "Why, yes, sir. Does it show?" "It's what I do." "All right, then. You've got your drink. Go and have your dance. Enjoy the party." "Thank you for the hospitality, Mr. Sorry, I don't even know where I am." "Carlyle. Try the shrimp mousse. It's damn tasty." Dance first. Juliet tugged him toward what he saw was an actual ballroom, decorated to the nines, with a live band rocking it out, and the balcony doors wide open. So he danced. He was good on his feet, as his mother had loved to dance, and he'd been her usual partner. He kept the drinking to half a glass, though he found the champagne a lot tastier than the shrimp mousse. He picked out a couple of marks, then one fell into his lap, almost literally. She tumbled into him on the dance floor, a woman somewhere in her 40s, he gauged, who hadn't kept the champagne anywhere near half a glass. She wore a tight silver dress showing off impressive breasts. Her chestnut hair had started to tumble out of whatever updo it started in, and her brown eyes laughed up at him. "Oops!" Then she locked her arms around him. "Since I got him, Juliet, I'm stealing him. This boy has the moves." "Show me some moves, cutie pie." He held her upright, sent Juliet a mildly panicked look for effect. She just rolled her pretty blue eyes. You go on. Give Miss Maisie a spin. Then I'm taking him back, Miss Maisie. If you can get him. Not flat out drunk, Harry decided as he gave her that spin, but she was heading there. While she giggled, flirted, hung on to him, he snapped open the safety on her bracelet, flipped the clasp, and had the very nice set of diamonds and sapphires sliding into his pocket. When the music ended, she said, "Ooh, you do have some moves." Julius wasting your moves on the dance floor, you ask me. Now, Miss Maisie, Juliet peeled her off, Harry. Shame on you for embarrassing my guest. Now I'm taking him back. Don't waste him, child. And she wandered off to find someone else to give her a spin. She really should get some fresh air. Oh, she'll be fine. Happens every year. He gave Juliet another dance to cover himself, and because he just wanted to. I really have to get back. I never expected to be out this long. Tell you what. If Willie's still up and moping, bring him back. We'll party the mopes out of him, and trust me, this is going on all night. I might just do that. I'd like to do that. She walked him down to the second floor, then turned away from the staircase. Just give me another minute. She led him down a wide corridor into a room. Her bedroom, he realized, when she nudged him inside, closed the door, leaned back on it. I bet Willie can handle another little while, and I'm so bored with these parties. Got any idea how to take care of that boredom? Maybe, now that you mention it. Right here. She smiled as she pulled her dress up and away, stood in the tiniest of black bra and panties. Right now, bang me up against this door, Silas, good, hard, and fast. Talk about Merry Christmas. He thought about the bracelets in his pocket, took some care so it didn't fall out, then he accommodated her. He walked back to the motel in a daze. If not for the weight of the bracelet in his pocket, he'd have sworn he dreamed it all. When he reached his room, he sat on the side of the bed and relived it all, especially the last part. The part where she'd wrapped both her legs around his waist, dug her nails into his shoulders. When he'd come, it had been an explosion. He hadn't known it could be that fast, that intense, that hot. If he had one regret, it was knowing he couldn't go back and do it all over again. But he pulled out the bracelet, got his loop, studied the stones under the light. Oh yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. He set his alarm, best to be gone at first light, and crawled into bed. Plans to head south and check out Florida. Maybe spend a week or two exploring the beaches, possibly all the way to the Keys, changed. No point winding his way toward Jacksonville when he'd pointed an arrow at it, just in case somebody put a missing diamond and sapphire bracelet and some dude who'd danced with its drunk owner together and wanted to chat. Instead, he spent his first Christmas Day on his own, cutting across Georgia to Alabama. Because he didn't want conversation. What are you doing all alone in Christmas, boy? He hit a vending machine for road food and snacked on chips, peanut butter crackers, Oreos, and Hershey bars while he traveled the rolling hills of the Pine Mount. Hyped on carbs and sugars, he crossed the Chattahoochee and drove straight through to Montgomery and a half-assed motel where he slept for 12 hours. He thought about Juliet, of the sunny cap of hair and supple legs, winging her way north to ski. It all seemed like a dream until he studied the bracelet. While he calculated he'd put enough miles between himself and Savannah, he didn't want to risk trying to sell the goods so soon. He learned to love the South, the feel of it, the food, the voices, and the slow, easy pace of the byways. He spent New Year's Eve in Mobile, watching the ball drop in Times Square in his hotel room while he ate cold pizza. After crossing the border into Mississippi, he spent New Year's Day enjoying the beach and the Gulf of Mexico. He considered settling down right there for a while, maybe getting a job, picking up some night work. Instead, he pawned the bracelet in Biloxi and moved on. Then he drove into New Orleans and fell in love. It had everything: the water, the voices, the food, the music, the architecture, and tourists with fat wallets, not to mention a historical district loaded with mansions. It had Tulane, smaller than he'd wanted to risk for slipping into college for some classes, but he thought he could manage it. After 2 days of exploring the French Quarter, he learned he could walk into the humblest of holes in the wall and eat like a king. A stroll down Bourbon Street after dark meant music pumping out of doorways, and tourists drunk and hurricanes he could relieve of watches or wallets with a simple bump and snatch. Taking the leap, he rented a furnished apartment on Burgundy Street, opened a local bank account, and, though it cost him, acquired a damn good fake driver's license, all under the name of Silas Booth. The enterprising soul, one Jack Xavier, who'd sold him the ID, had a cousin, a tarot reader, who worked as a bartender at night. Dauphine LeBlanc had wide, soulful eyes and a flood of black hair. She didn't mind if he hung out at the bar some nights, listening to the music, drinking cokes or sweet tea, and trolling for marks. She wore snug, colorful shirts and a chains of crystals. The crystals prompted him one night halfway through January, while the band oozed out deep, dark Delta blues, to tell her she reminded him of his aunt. She pursed her pretty, full lips, angled her head. "You sit there, Dudu, and say you look at all this fine, and you see your tanti?" "No, not like that. She's into crystals, and she's working as a phone psychic, and she's terrific." And Mags didn't feature in any of his sex dreams, where Dauphine had started a time or two. At 22, she treated him a little like a stray dog who came to the door, kindly, with occasional and vague affection, and no ties whatsoever. But then he wasn't looking for ties. He drank his sweet tea, enjoyed the music as she worked the bar, before she came back down and topped off his glass. You should come into the shop so I can read your cards. She wouldn't do it for free. Her cousin had told him Delphine had a hard line on the issue. Do a free reading for one, and it opened the door for the flood of friends and relations to want the same. Maybe, sometime. I already see what I see. I come from a line, and we know what we know. You see plenty too. She leaned over. He had a generous view of her excellent cleavage, but since he'd been raised better, he kept his gaze on her face. Like the table there, with a man so white he glows, while he sweats through his fancy shirt and drinks whiskey sours. You see, as I see, the big, ugly gold watch, and the woman he's with, and whose leg he strokes under the table, isn't his wife. His wife's home somewhere, like Toledo, while he brings his side piece with him to the convention here, where he can play his big shot on his expense account. Delphine tapped her finger on the back of his hand. You see? I see. But why Toledo? Thereabouts, anyway. His accent. Ah, bien sûr. Yankees, they all sound the same to me. You have good ears, I think. An idea struck, so he went with it. How much would you charge to teach me French? She waved him off, moved down the bar to fill orders. He'd learned, even on the short acquaintance, to just wait. The band went up-tempo, and feet started stomping. A group of 4 college-type girls, he concluded, came in and crowded at the bar. Delphine would card them all, and it occurred to him if any of them had a fake ID, it might be courtesy of her cousin. Delphine came back, put a plate of crawfish boulettes and Creole mustard sauce in front of them. She'd charge him for it, but he couldn't complain. What do you want to learn French for? I like to learn. She eyed him while she mopped at the bar. What kind of French you want to learn? You got French like in Paris. You got Louisiana Creole. You got Cajun French and more. All of it, or as much as you know. We do this. I give you 1 lesson, 1 hour, $50, and if I think you are an imbecile, c'est tout. If I think you are not wasting my time and your money, we go. $25 each lesson. Deal. You won't think I'm an imbecile. She didn't look convinced, but nodded. Tomorrow night, 8. You have dinner and a good bottle of wine for me. 1 hour. No funny business. That night before he went to bed, he put the gold watch, a Gucci, and the cash from the wallet he'd tossed in the space he'd made beneath the floor beds under his bed. He'd hold on to the watch for a few weeks, where it could keep company with a very nice pair, about 2 carats each, of ruby earrings, a cuff of rainbow sapphires, and a tag hue aqua racer. Once he sold them, not all at once, of course, and not all in the same place, he'd add to his bank accounts. He'd never have to worry about someone taking away the roof over his head, or if Mags had enough to get by. He settled in with one of the books on art history he'd borrowed from the library with a card. He thought the day was fast approaching when he could expand his night work to art. He had to pay somebody to buy the wine, as even his fake ID had him underage. He decided to cook. He liked having a kitchen and often tossed a meal together. But he wanted something a little better, or more adult than mac and cheese or a burger. Since he didn't think he developed the skills to try a Cajun or Creole meal yet, he fell back on one of his mother's standbys for company. In the days when they'd had company for dinner, he hit the farmer's market for red potatoes, found some early asparagus, bought a baguette, some chicken, and a small praline cheesecake. He wouldn't hit on her, he thought, as he quartered the potatoes. She might laugh him off, humiliating, or refuse to continue the lessons, and he wanted French in his pocket. So he made the meal, and if the steps and the scents brought his mother into his apartment, it didn't hurt as much as it had. He found some comfort in it. He set the table, put out the flowers he'd bought. He didn't light candles, didn't put on music, sent the wrong message. When she knocked precisely at 8, he concluded prompt would be part of his lessons. She wore a body-skimming black dress and red heels that put her nearly eye to eye with him. Nearly a month had passed since his brief and intense sex in Savannah, so he thought he could be forgiven the spike of lust. Bonsoir, he said. Bienvenue. She nodded. C'est bon. She stepped in, gave the tiny apartment a quick glance. You keep it clean. I have 3 brothers, all slobs. Their rooms always smell like dirty socks and a moldy bread. Yours smell like good cooking. Did you cook or pretend to? I bought the bread and the cake. I made the rest. She wandered the few short steps into the kitchen. Where did you learn to cook? My mother. Those soulful eyes went straight to his. She's left us? I have ears too, she added. I hear sorrow. Yeah, last year. Jesus désolé. She touched her heart. I think you've done her proud with this cooking. Now pour me some wine. De vin. Louisiana French. De vin in formal French. She tapped her ear. You have to listen to hear the difference. He poured wine for both of them. The second is, like you said, more formal. I can hear that. Then you hear good. She stepped to the window, pointed. The car? Un car. Louisiana French. Un automobile in French. But you see, you can blend and mix here. Not, I think, in France, but here you can use either or both. It shows you know more than one language. So we who do switch from French, English, Creole because we can. You have to be fluent in all first. Mais who? The wine is good. Le vin est bon. When he repeated it, she pursed those lips and nodded. Your accent's good for a beginner. So you can feed me what smells so good. I think talking with dinner is a good way to learn. He proved not to be an imbecile, so she agreed to come back the next week for half the price, a meal and good wine. On the third week, they had the lesson over his first attempt at crawfish estouffee. You could get a job as a cook. I know places. It's no fun if you have to do it, and I'm slow at it. Only got a handful of things I can make. Besides, I'm not looking for legit work yet. I asked my aunt to come for Mardi Gras, and I want to show her around, have the time for her. She tossed her massive hair back as she looked around the apartment. You're clean, and you have a pretty face. I tell you not to move on me, and you don't. You have manners. I think you know this from the lessons and the song. He picked up his wine, took a careful sip. I'm a heterosexual male. You're beautiful, sexy, funny, smart, and you've got that body. You've really got a body. So, I don't want romance. I don't have time for it. I like you, a friend, a clever friend. If you fall in love with me, I'll break that good heart and be sorry for it. I don't want romance. Um, he muttered something in French. She corrected. He repeated it. Maybe you'll fall in love with me, then I'll be sorry to break your heart. We're safe here. She held out a hand. A miss. A miss, he agreed. Is your bedroom clean like the rest? Yeah. She got up, held out her hand again. Montrez-moi.